Ask the Podcast Coach for June 7th, 2025.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means it is Saturday morning. It is time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Cullison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Always good to be here on a Saturday morning on Ask the Podcast Coach. I look forward to it every week, and I'm glad that folks come out and join us live.
Yeah, it was, the alarm went off, and I was like, oh, it's Saturday, which is good, because there are times when the alarm goes off, and I think it's Sunday, and I get ready for church, only to realize about, an hour in, I'm like, oh, wait, I have Asked the Podcast Coach. It hasn't happened yet, so. Toe. So that's always fun. And, the old, oops, I moved the footstool and just kind of forgot and just jammed my foot into it. And so all the outdoor stuff I had planned this weekend is now just out the window. But what'll pick up your day if, you've broken your toe? That's right, a hot cup of Java. And that particular coffee pour is brought to you by our good friend Marc over at podcastbranding.co. Look, it's so beautiful because Marc is a podcaster. He's been podcasting for years. He makes great looking artwork. He makes great looking websites. If you want to go see one, go check out congressionaldish.com. That's a friend of mine, so I get a twofer on that one. And he's going to sit down with you one-on-one. He's going to go listen to your show. The whole point of this is to make sure your brand is on point for maximum effect of your audience. They want to ooh, wow, this person hasn't drawn their website with a crayon and they look professional. And so you got to remember, they're going to see you way before they hear you. And it's that, we talked about it last week about stopping the scroll. What stops the scroll? Great artwork, professional looking artwork that's going to make you just grab that attention. And then if they click through that and click on the website and they see that as well, they're like, wow, I want to work with this person. So there's only one place to go. That is podcastbranding.co. Tell them Dave and Jim sent you.
And of course, big thanks to our good friend Dan Lefebvre over there, Based on a True Story Podcast, basedonatruestorypodcast.com. As you would expect it this week, Saving Private Ryan. Friday was the 81st anniversary of D-Day, and Dan has that posted out there today. And so if you check it out, if you're into that, if you want to see how much of it based on a true story, you can check it out today, Based on a True Story Podcast at basedonatruestorypodcast.com. Dan, thanks for your sponsorship.
Yeah, I was tempted to go watch Saving Private Ryan again, just to watch the opening sequence. That was amazing. When
go listen to the podcast. I mean, you've seen
there you
movie.
go.
That's a movie you stop. Like if you come across it on TV, you just stop and watch it. Or I watch the clips on YouTube all the time. Just you get the best parts of it, kind of thing. But that's a winner every time. So you can go listen to Dan's podcast instead of watching it all over again. Listen to Dan's podcast.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, the big news this week, at least for me, because there's always, Spotify fired a bunch of people. Okay, well that's, isn't that every week kind of thing? But the one that I was like, was Marc Maron is retiring his WTF podcast sometime in the fall. And there are a couple things that I wanted to point out about this. Number one, Marc, and if you're not familiar with Marc, he started his podcast because he was kind of a weenie and had burned so many bridges in his entertainment kind of career. He had a drug problem at one point. And so he's like, well, I guess I'll start a podcast. And so he started this podcast, and really the early days, the first 20 episodes were amazing because he was pulling on people that he had really kind of messed over and kind of apologized. It was almost like therapy. In fact, the original episodes, he was using AC/DC's Livewire as the theme song, which somebody eventually said, hey, you can't do that. But he retired and he's been doing it for 16 years. He's been doing 2 episodes a week for 16 years. And his team consists of Marc and his producer. That's it. This isn't a NPR where at the end they're like, all right, the assistant storyboard editor, music provider, thought provoker. It's like, no, it's 2 people. And he said the reason that they are going to stop sometime in the fall is they're burnt out. And what was interesting about this is he's really, the thing that really put him on the map is he was really, really popular. And then President Barack Obama went to be interviewed in his garage, which was interesting because Marc was explaining how they had like snipers on his neighbor's roofs for, protection of the president and that whole 9 yards. And what I thought was interesting is I watched one YouTube video who said, well, how can we help avoid the same failure that Maron had? And I'm like, wait, didn't you just say he interviewed a sitting president of the United States? I'm like, A, that's not a failure. And B, he's done this for 16 years. And so my thought was, I think we're going to see some of this. I know last year there were like 4 or 5 kind of big YouTubers that just went, I can't serve the algorithm anymore. My 2-year-old doesn't recognize me, and they quit. And so I'm always like, when people are like, well, I would start a podcast, but it's oversaturated and there's no room for me. And I'm like, well, yeah, eventually people are going to retire. And so a couple of things I thought were odd. One, why not just go down to 1 a week instead of 2 a week, or once every other week? Or like, if you're burned out, take a break or cut your schedule or something. But the other thing I thought was that probably led to this is, what is Marc's primary income from his podcast? And their ads. And the problem, he said in quotation marks, is when you have advertisers, you're under contract to do episodes. Like, hey, I've sponsored the next 12 episodes. They will include A, B, and C. It will be delivered and blah, blah, blah. So you can't kind of take a break unless you somehow put that in your contract that like, hey, in the event I want to jump out a window, I reserve the right to take a break and we will finish your advertising run. But some of that, sponsors are promoting a product that just launched or whatever it is. And so that might have led something to it. But here's the thing I thought was that I was like, ooh, the thing I'm really interested to see, because the other thing you got to keep in mind, when Marc started, he was kind of a failing musician, even though he'd been on Letterman and Conan and things like that. But he wasn't where he used to be. His career was going the wrong way. And since then, he starts this podcast. It takes off. He got a TV show for a while that was actually really good on some cable station that I can't remember, but it was good. And then he started doing more acting. He was on a show called Glow on Netflix. And although it doesn't look good on a resume now, it sounds good to go, oh, I've worked with Robert De Niro. And you go, oh, really? In what? And he's like, oh, the Joker movie. And then you're like, oh, that was one of the worst movies of last year. But he's doing more and more acting. So I don't think it's all burnout on podcasting. I think it's also, hey, when I started, I had 1 occupation and now I have 3. I'm a podcaster, I'm a comedian, and an actor. And I think he actually likes, the acting because he's doing more and more of that. And eventually you got to go, something's got to go. And so my big thing is going to be, who's the next Marc Maron? Like, who's going to fill that spot? Because there are those people that say, oh, I would start, but again, there's no room. And I'm like, well, eventually those people are going to, Johnny Carson eventually left the Tonight Show and somebody had to take his place. And because Marc's kind of left leaning, he's very there's nobody like Marc Maron. He is kind of got a Chicken Little complex where he's always convinced the world is coming to an end. And I don't think that's shtick. I think that's actually his thing. But if you think about it, I totally kind of missed it. In April, I hit 20 years as a podcaster. And there are a lot, I'm not the only one. And so there's going to come a time probably in the next couple of years where the people, the quote OGs are going to go, you know what, I'm going to go play with the grandkids. And they're just going to go peace out and leave. So it'll be interesting to see who fills this spot, if anybody. I don't know. But Jim, you're a person that takes breaks. When you don't want to do a show, you don't do a show. And from what I've heard, it hasn't really killed your show. It's not something we recommend. We all preach consistency, but in the end, your mental state is more important than that. And so
I think we're not as important as we think we are sometimes in that, in that setting, at work, and at work, my shows are inconsistently posted. We'll go a month or maybe in a 2-month period, we'll go every other week for a while. And then we might go a couple months without it on one podcast. Sometimes, we do these seasons concepts on the Clifton Strengths podcast. Those are based on seasons, and there's breaks over the winter, our winter here in North America. So, November, December gets a little thin, January, and then we start picking those back up again. Those are kind of natural breaks. I think he's just tired of the content. Listen, we're gonna face that here, right? We may be in the midst of that right now with Ask the Podcast Coach, and like the podcasting space isn't what it used to be, and there's a lot of things we used to have time to talk about that just don't matter anymore, whatever. So you have to constantly be asking yourself that question, like, should we, we're 90 minutes, should we reduce it to 60 until there's more to talk about, right? That's a conversation we should probably have. We skip weeks, not that often, but we do it. And then the power was out the other week. You tried to get it working, but it didn't. We skipped. It was fine, right? I think Marc's just tired. Listen, you can't do your podcast forever. That's just not a reality, right? At some point you're like, okay, that's enough. He made it a lot longer than I thought he would. I mean, most of the Hollywood or big names or whatever, with maybe the exception of his name keeps
Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan. I do not know why he's the most famous podcaster in the world. That name, when I go to say it, just flies out of my head. Even Rogan at some point will be like, all right, this is enough. Like, I've had enough of this kind of stuff. So good. Listen, congratulations, Marc. He's been around a long time, doing a lot of a lot of good work in his genre of podcasting. And so good on him. Good on him for saying, I imagine it's the fall, so they can wrap up all their advertising.
Their advertising,
stuff, yeah. So he's like, he'd probably quit today if he could, but it's okay, I've got contractual obligations to meet.
I've noticed, I used to listen a lot more because he had guests I'd heard of, and now I don't know what happened, but it's somebody who's got a show that I've never heard of. And he kind of walks, it's always kind of the same interview with Marc. It's like, tell me about your parents, what'd they do? How'd you get into showbiz? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But if it's somebody I don't care about, then I don't care about them. And I think for him, look, he got to interview the president and he got to interview his childhood hero, Keith Richards. And what's funny is he had quit smoking for a decade or so. And Keith Richards offered him a cigarette, and he took it. He's like, how often do you get a chance to smoke a cigarette with Keith Richards? It was funny. For sure. Dan says, from Based on a True Story podcast, does anyone fill a spot of a retiring podcaster, or are there just always new shows popping up naturally regardless? Yeah, there may not be. I know, I think she's leaving. I think Kelly Clarkson is leaving her daytime talk show. I keep hearing rumors that I know she took a break because she had some sort of family emergency. And now the rumors that she's kind of back, but she's probably going to leave. And so then it's like, and she kind of took over the Ellen DeGeneres space when she left, so it might be a little different in podcasting because there are just so many options. Living the Next Chapter podcast said Todd and Rob are parting ways from the new media show. I know they were thinking about it. I haven't listened to the latest episode. That's one that they got stuck. They're stuck on talking, is video a podcast?
Right.
And it's like a record. It's like every time the song's going along fine, and then all of a sudden, 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 just like, oh, are they gonna? And I get that. Chris from castahead.net, nobody wants to hear someone who's burnt out. Exactly. Maybe Maron's absence will create more pent up demand from him if when he's ready to come back. He goes, I might come back with another podcast, but I think he's tired of doing this one 2 times a week. And I'm like, and I know he was doing one with his friend for a while where they would just kind of go on and rant. Barb, thank you so much. She says, be sure to hit the thumbs up on this video. I came in late and noticed there had not been one registered before mine. So thank you so much for that. Conan actually might be the next Marc Maron. That's a really good point, Rich. Because the thing I hate about Conan is I always joke, I'm like, it should be called Conan O'Brien Needs Some Cash. Because there's so many ads in his show. And and what gets me, it's a good news, bad news. The good news is he does, in some cases, really good interviews. And you're in a deep subject talking about mental health and dealing with being famous, and somebody's being really vulnerable, and then they got to stop and talk about MeUndies. And I'm like, oh, come on, really? And then Conan does his ads very off the cuff, so he's not just reading bullet points. So on one hand, he does good commercials. It just seems like they're every 7 minutes. And it drives me nuts because he does shorts, and it's a short that's 7 minutes and 2 minutes of it is an ad. And I'm like, really? Didn't you sell like your company to Sirius Satellite Radio for $8.9 gazillion? I'm like, what's up with the ads? So, they're saying Todd did the last episode on his own. He explains what is next without Rob. Oh, that's interesting. I did not know that because that one's been going on a while.
Breaking news right here.
Breaking news.
We break it here.
Yeah.
And traffic and weather on the 9s.
Well, they were talking about rebranding the show because when podcasting first came out, it was new media. Well, that was 20 years ago. So is it now the midlife media? I mean, but they were talking about podcasting and so that'll be interesting. And I know Rob really...
We've even changed, right? I mean, we're an opinion show at this point. We're not, from time to time, we'll talk about technology or we'll bring in, some of those kinds of things or comment on something new. But Dave, you and I over the last 6 months, I mean, if you go back and listen to these episodes, and many of you do, those thanks to those who come out and listen live, we've kind of become, we take a topic like Marc Maron and it's 30 minutes of opinion on it. And, so that, to me, that kind of shows how much the industry's matured. I wouldn't say has slowed down. I'd say it's matured. Things don't need to change as much. The hosting platforms have about as much hosting stuff as they can do. There's not too much more new in the space, right? Dynamic ad insertion was a big topic for a long time, but those who want it, have it. Those that don't. I think everybody's using it the way they want to use it now. I don't think there's as much, controversy or talk around some of those topics that are there. I mean, how long can we talk about Spotify, for God's sakes, right? So I think as the industry has matured, it's allowed for us to have some commentary around what's happening in that. That's kind of what, in the last 6 months, what we've kind of gone to. Now, will that change? Probably. I think we're in the lull and we're waiting for the next big disruption in podcasting, whatever that is. We've had a couple starts with it, right? We've had some, there's been some spots where you thought, ooh, maybe this is it. And then, no, it wasn't. Maybe this is it. No, it isn't. What kind of effect will AI have on that? I think we're just starting to see, the AI tools that have rolled out to help podcasters do their stuff. That's a pretty mature space right now too. Everybody's using the tools that they want to use in AI and do some other stuff. There's some AI creation going on. I think at this point, everybody's kind of I don't know if that's ready yet, but I think we're in a lull. I think it's this kind of boils down to not a lot of news. We're making things up to talk about, and a lot of comments or a lot of opinion stuff.
Well, yeah, I know one of the things I saw that I was like, oh, this would be kind of a cool topic. I mean, we have other questions. Of course, if you have, in fact, Ralph gave us a question, but we might come back to this one. And I was like, oh, this would be a good idea for Ask the Podcast Coach. What are the best and worst parts of having a podcast? Not really a how-to kind of question or what, but what's the best and what's the worst? but I did mark that. Ralph had a question, and this somewhat makes me sad. Or not sad, but I'm just like, okay, once again, Dave needs a better way of showing his services. Is there a central place for podcasters to offer ad swaps with each other? I was also wondering if anyone would be interested in doing a peer review mastermind. We do that in my field. Well, the peer review mastermind is a little thing in the School of Podcasting that says feedback corner. And I'm not sure why. I started a peer review mastermind once. And the answer, now, again, this was probably 10 years ago, so maybe I should start it again. But my whole point was, hey, let's all get together. We're all trying to do the best show we can. And so let's listen to each other's podcasts and offer constructive feedback. And everybody was like, oh, I'd love some constructive feedback. And I'm like, great, but realize you have to listen to other people's shows too. And they go, oh, yeah, I don't have time for that. And I was like, oh, okay. And I really tried because I was like, I'm sure I have a domain like podcast mastermind or podcast something, whatever it is. I don't know of any, but there is a feedback corner in the School of Podcasting right now. Kenny from the Cuz Kevin show or Cuz Wilson show is asking for feedback in the School of Podcasting. But yeah, that's where it's weird because on one hand, you want to ask your friends, hey, I need some feedback on this, but sometimes your friends aren't your target audience. So that's always tricky. And then the book I'm listening to right now, I think it's called The Mom Method. I will say this, because I haven't said anything negative about Spotify yet. As an audiobook listening tool, it's I don't want to say it's horrible. I will say it's not even close to Audible because you can't make bookmarks. It's a book. If we're trying to reproduce the thing of actually reading a book, you used to be able to put pieces of paper in it to go, ooh, or highlight it or something. Nope, you can just read it and then you just got to take a screenshot and hope you remember what the 16-minute and 37-second mark was about. But the book is called The Mom Test: How to Talk to Customers and Learn If Your Business is a Good Idea When Everyone is Lying to You. And he really goes into how, I've always said this before, where if you ask somebody and they go, you're like, hey, I need you to, listen to this show or whatever. And they come back like, so what'd you think of the show? And they're like, oh man, look at you. Look at all the lights and the cameras and stuff. Wow. You sound so professional. Okay. Notice they're not talking about the content. Man, your artwork looks great. It's kind of, if you've ever seen the episode of Friends where Joey's like, hey, I was on TV. And they're like, and somebody said, all right, and they're like, all right, I've got great script. Somebody takes this and somebody says, all right, I've got, wait, how is this even happening? You're right in front of me and you're on the TV at the same time. And it's kind of one of those things. So it's hard to get, I think, constructive feedback. And I'm also not positive people want constructive feedback. What they really want when they say, hey, which this makes sense, but I think people just want you to agree with everything they've done at this point. Because there are times, I remember I had a guy at the School of Podcasting and he asked for feedback. And I said, well, because we always go through, why are you doing this? Who was it for? And I said, okay, this is not in alignment with your goal. Like, can you explain to me how this is going to do this? And oh, by the way, you're telling a story. I said, so in the theater of the mind, this person is here, and you took this huge tangent. And meanwhile, I'm almost not listening to your tangent because in the story, this person just got shot. And I'm wondering what happened to like he's bleeding on the sidewalk and you're off talking about, and he quit the School of Podcasting because he didn't like my feedback. And I was like, okay, like, go. And as far as I know, I think he actually quit his podcast, but it was like, I'm giving you feedback. This is what my brain is doing. Now it's a survey of one, and I may not be your target audience, but Chris says find someone that will give you honest feedback, but be ready to receive it. That's the key. They want you to get better too. Dan from Based on a True Story podcast, perhaps a challenge to peer review is you'll get a good mix of hobby podcasters who don't want to treat their podcast like a business. That could be. Because there are and then there's always that, it's my art, man. Oh, Ralph is coming back with a bold statement. If you don't want feedback and you're not going to act on it, you're going to fail. It may not be today, but it's a certainty. Well, I mean, that works in everything, right? I'm pleasantly surprised. I'm in the middle of watching it. I'm binging it. It's called The Four Seasons on Netflix. It's got Steve Carell, Tina Fey, the one guy from Saturday Night Live, and you can remember his name and this and that. And because as soon as you see him, like, oh, that's the guy who used to be on Saturday Night Live. And when I saw the title, I was like, I remember a very old movie with Alan Alda in it called The Four Seasons. Well, it turns out it's that movie, and it's broken into 6 episodes, 30 minutes each. And what's really cool about it, spoiler alert, is there's a wedding scene, and the one lady's like, yeah, my dad is actually going to be able to make it. And the dad walks in, and who is it? It's Alan Alda, who's in his 90s, I think, at this point, and has a podcast, Alan Alda from MASH. And it's really good. And you're like, Dave, what does this have to do with feedback? It's all about marriage. If you're married, you should watch this, because they really talk about communication and how you have to be open, and you have to be open for feedback that, hey, this isn't working for me, and you got to do this and that. So feedback is a really tricky thing. Yeah, Rich says 4 Seasons is a great show. Yeah, I was kind of like, is this the thing? And then I got it. Plus, it's got great music in it. They've got all these cool classical pieces on it. And so, yeah, Stephanie says even art needs feedback, and she's an artist. So there you go. Yeah, it's I just did a thing for Podpage talking about using the built-in survey and how surveys are important. And the first thing you have to figure out is, what am I going to do with this feedback? Because if they do say my show is too long, or, I wish this was daily instead of bi-weekly, or whatever, like, you have to figure out, why am I doing the show, and is this person that's giving me the feedback, do they have a point? And if so, what am I going to do about that? I mean, we always talk about on this show, the guy that gave us a page and a half of notes, and they were all great notes, except he wanted us to do an interview show, and that's not what this show is. And it's like, well, we appreciate the feedback, but that's a completely different show than what we're doing here. And so it's kind of tricky that way.
Well, feedback. Listen, feedback is an interesting animal in itself, because there isn't a great way to know, if, in all cases, if the feedback's valid, good, bad, relevant. Like, I get plenty of feedback on things that is good, and I get plenty that I'm glad I didn't listen to. Now, the person giving me the feedback, they thought it was good, and it could have been, but it wasn't right for me, or right for the situation, or right for what I wanted to do, or for the direction I wanted to go. And it's kind of this is a hard part about it. It's kind of a Boolean issue, where it's yes or no. If you implement it and it's successful, and then you think, well, then it was good. But if you didn't implement it, you never know if it was going to be successful or not. So in some cases you don't know. It's tough to know. If you listen, I would imagine, just going back to Marc Maron, I'd imagine in the early days of Marc Maron's podcast, there were a lot of people giving him a lot of feedback on what he should and shouldn't do, the way he should do it, the way he shouldn't do it, the way it's this and that, and those kinds of things.
Right.
So, of course, for the individual giving the feedback, they feel like they're right, and that's okay, right? That's okay. The trick on the person receiving the feedback is, does that feedback necessarily fit the direction I'm going, the things that I'm doing, the way that I want to do it? Is it appropriate for my audience? Is it right? In some cases, if you listen to all of your feedback, you eventually whittle that down to an audience of a few, because you've custom built your show for a few people, right? And sometimes the loudest ones, the ones that you get the most feedback from, are the ones that have what in their mind is a popular opinion, but isn't so popular with everybody else. I mean, I've taken feedback from folks on both shows at work and Home Gadget Geeks, and I immediately get feedback like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you? What are you doing? Why are you doing that?" And I'm like, "Well, I got some feedback that this was not," and they're like, "No, that's not. Don't no." So what do you do then when you have two competing bits of feedback from audience members that are completely opposite, right? And so it's feedback's a tough. I mean, I think you really got to handle it with you're in your listen, there's always no brainers. Yeah, don't do this. Okay, everybody agrees. Yeah, but I think most of the feedback, a lot of the time that we get, is very gray, and it's like, well, okay, if I implement that for you, then someone else is going to not benefit from it. I had somebody in Home Gadget Geeks that wanted me to go on to Supercast. And I was like, I'll be honest with you, it'd be great. I don't know if I want to spend the time for an audience of one on Supercast. I don't talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it. And I just kind of had to say, yeah, not now. Not now. If I got a few more people that came to me and said, it was just like when I went out with no video RSS feed, and I had a person say, "Can you make video RSS?" And I said, "I don't know. Let me ask." So I asked the audience, and a few people are like, "Oh yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to have it." It stunned me. I was like, "Why?" I was like, "Just watch it on YouTube." And like, "We don't want to watch it on YouTube." Okay, well that makes sense. I've got more than a voice of one, so to speak, in there. So just make sure I think you're being real cautious in your, in the consideration of that feedback. Not all feedback is good feedback, right? And not all feedback's valid for you.
And not
Some
all
of it,
feedback is easy to implement. That's the other thing too. I mean,
sure.
I know at Podpage,
right.
we get a lot of feedback. We openly ask for feedback, and sometimes we'll see something, we're like, "Ooh, that's a pretty good suggestion." And then it's like, what would it take to implement that? And so then in some cases, it's like, all right, pin that. Let's see if anybody else asks for that. Because you could be, like you said, doing a premium podcast for one person. And you're like, okay, so they're paying me $5 and I'm spending an extra 4 hours a month. That's when you're like, wait a minute. So you have to kind of think about that. Jeff C says, talking about the Four Seasons, if I watch that, I'd have to discuss it with my wife. Yes, I would highly recommend that. Here's a great one. Justin says, feedback is so essential as long as it's delivered using a welcome feedback model. So, because it's so easy to be critical and negative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's the tricky part. That's where a lot of people do you know what, you're such an amazing person, and I love the way you did this. However, and then they get to and then at the end they're like, but it's, good for you. So they put it in a happy sandwich of, this is good, this needs work, but this is really great kind of thing. Beauty Bubble says the feedback opener I use is, I suck at this. Can you tell me where I don't? That's a different approach. And then Ralph says he was talking with Stephanie and said, I appreciate your feedback. It is valuable, and I always listen to it and then make my own decisions, as I would suggest we all do. Right, because you're the person that knows your why, and sometimes that suggestion doesn't steer you towards the why.
Sure.
He also said you didn't answer the question about an ad swap. That is something, I think I still own the domain. I don't think it points at anything anymore. Podcast promo swap. I used to do a podcast promo swap podcast, and I would play promos. And here's some lessons that I learned from that. Never base a show that is your brand, kind of, because, you're the host, when you don't control the content. And so that was almost the birth of the podcast rodeo show, because my favorite was, there was a guy that just, if I remember right, he just said vegetables. It was like carrots, cucumbers, whatever. And I'm just like, what? And he never said the name of the show, and he never said where to find it. That was his promo. And I was like, okay, well, that would have been a great promo, except you didn't say the name of the show, and you didn't say where to find it. And then they were just, horrible promos. And I had a place where it was categorized by the Apple category. So if I wanted to see a thing, show me all the sports promos. And then you could go there and grab their promo. And it was a link to their website. So you could click on it and say, hey, I played your promo on my show. If you want to play mine, you don't have to. But if you want to, so just a way to get people together. And the thing that's kind of disappointing in a way is back in the day, like the early days of podcasting, promo swaps were all that and a bag of chips. I mean, everybody had a 30-second, 60-second promo, and you'd play anybody's. So it'd be like, hey, I do a show about chainsaws. Great. I do a show about Christmas stuff. Here, play my, not even remotely related, and everybody would just do it. It was awesome because we were all about promoting podcasting. And then I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden it's not that it's out of favor. It's just, you'd go to somebody's website and you'd have a link in their sidebar, 30-second promo. And people would be like, hey, I got your promo. I played it. And they're like, thanks, give me your promo. I'll play. And so I'm not sure what happened to that. I don't know of any, central thing. I think I tried to have a Google form for a while. And I was going to have a thing where if you, like when somebody submitted a promo, like Jim submits a promo for Home Gadget Geeks, you would be on an email list that said, hey, we got a new promo. It's from Jim at Home Gadget Geeks. He classifies his show as technical and geekery. So if you're a technical and geekery show, you might want to go to Jim's website here. And that was the thing. I was going to do almost like a Yahoo. Remember when there were Yahoo groups? And,
oh my God.
Yeah. So to notify people, but it's just one of those things where I don't know what happened that all of a sudden promos.
I don't think they work. I don't think they work. Like, this is why I don't, there's networks that pop up. We've seen this done a couple times. There's varying, as you were talking, I was looking up this topic and like who's currently doing this. And there's a few out there and they're kind of no named and it's really sketchy, and I'd be really careful with it. I don't think promo swaps work. Like, I think we tried this both with the banner ads back in the day, and then that kind of dies out. And then there's been a bunch of different promo swap type things. I think so. The idea itself is sound. I don't think going out to strangers is what works. Like, nobody's listened to a podcast, listens to an ad of somebody they've never heard of before. I shouldn't say nobody. I think the odds are much, much lower in that 1%, maybe less than that category of getting it done, and then goes and listens to a podcast. I would much rather curate, and Mark kind of alludes to this in chat. He says not promos, but I plug Ralph and Craig all the time.
Yeah.
I would much rather develop relationships with other podcasts where, for Home Gadget Geeks, I have thinkcomputers.org on. I have hometech.fm on. They become part of the network that way. And they begin, I would want to spend, this is my feedback, I would want to spend my time developing relationships with other folks in those spaces and then building out the network that way. That would be my preference. I think a 30 or 60-second promo swap, it's just low value. Could it work? Yeah, maybe. I just think it's low value. I think the high value of relationships built and having them on in some way that works for your audience, to have a voice, to get to know them, if you trust them in that way. So that would be, Dave. I personally would not go down that path.
Yeah, it's on the same lines as social media, but the times I've had it work was repeated mentions. Like Chris said, he promotes Jeff C. show on his show, and so that's something that works. When we were doing the Podcasters Roundtable, and it was me and Ray and Daniel, we just started promoting each other's shows because we listened to each other's show. So like here, often I'll be like, oh, James Cridlin said this over at Pod News. And that's just organic. And we were organically promoting each other. And consequently, we got, at least I got people that say, I would say, how did you find me? They're like, oh, I heard you on the roundtable, or I heard Ray talk about you or whatever. So I think that's where it kind of comes in handy. They're talking about Tink Media. If you go to tinkmedia.co And Lauren, if I remember right, is her name. And I've never met Lauren. I've seen her multiple times at things, and I was like, oh, I need to go say hi because I know I like her stuff. I'm on her newsletter. But if you go under, I believe it's Podcast Friends, they have podcast swaps. And so there's a newsletter database. There is a friends thing here. I'm not sure where the promo swap is. Add your show to this list. So if I view the podcast friends list and I scroll down and it fills it in. Oh, so this is just an Airtable that they've put together, but very similar to what I had back in the day where it was, here's a show and here's a button to contact them. And then ad type is dynamic insertion. So interesting. I'll have to check that out. But it's one of those things. I know when I've used the Buzzsprout ads and you put a 40-second ad in and I tracked everything on those campaigns, and again, just not a lot of traffic. And that's where the podcaster and the advertiser have to okay both sides. So the advertiser says, I'd like to sponsor on your show. And then the podcaster goes, yeah, I think you're a good fit for my audience. And it still didn't really, and again, when I say it doesn't work, like I got, 15 clicks to my website. Now, was that worth, a couple $100? Probably not, so that's something I'll have to look into that. Because I know maybe. Dan says, yeah,
it might be, you got to determine that. Like one of those could lead to something else.
See, that's it. And it's any kind of advertising. There are three things involved. There is the actual clip, right? So if it's, like I said, if it's a horrible promo, and there are horrible promos, and I cry every time I hear somebody go, it's the Jack and Jill show where we talk about whatever it is and wacky sound effects and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh, okay, maybe check out Jack and Jill. And they're like, find us wherever you find your podcast. And I'm like, no, why didn't you give me your website address? Because then you type in Jack and Jill and it's just, all sorts of bizarre stuff. And so there's the actual promo, then there's the landing page. So when they assume there's a link in the show notes, they click on that. And then when you send them to a thing that like talks all about how great you are and how you should listen, but there's no follow button anywhere in life. Well, then they're like, yeah, I really would like your stuff, but I can't find you in the podcast apps because search stinks. You should, for me, I would set up a video that says, hey, thanks so much for stopping by the website. Underneath this video, we've got links to Apple, Spotify, Overcast, and Pocket Cast. Subscribe in your favorite show, and I would love to hear any feedback you have about it. I'm always trying to make the show the best I can for you. And that's it. But if you make them go search for your show, you've just wasted your money. It's just not that easy. I've heard shows that I've like, ooh, I wouldn't mind checking that out. And then you're driving or you're walking or you're washing the dishes and then you never go back. So it's one of those things. It's a strategy. And I would think when everything really, like how Chris is doing it with Jeff's show, I think when it's repeated, you might have a better chance. But just a one-off, here, play my promo, that's going to really lessen the
low
chance.
Percentage, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it has an opportunity to work, certainly in this, tinkmedia.co. It's got the opportunity. It's if you're willing to pay or if you're willing to swap some of those and have that on your show and share your brand with those, by all means, it's an inexpensive way to get it done. I think it's just low percentage, kind of shotgun. Does it hurt you? Well, to your point, if the ad is bad, you probably wouldn't play the ad if it was bad, right? But if the ad is bad or whatever, or I would certainly check out that person before Ralph, in your situation, giving financial advice, I would be really, really, really cautious about just playing anybody on my podcast, so to speak. Of course, you're going to check that out. I know you're going to get it checked out, but be careful in those situations of just a swap. It's just low, very, very low percentage. I mean, even listen, word of mouth is the highest. I think it's some of the best form of marketing you can get, and even that is a fairly low percentage conversion. And so, it's just a lot of hard work getting it out there, beating the streets, getting your name in front of people. Takes a lot of time and a lot of consistency. In print and media marketing, what works is a strong brand. And so you've got to build both your marketing and your brand together at the same time. When people see that marketing and they see the brand name and they recognize they have that brand recognition and they immediately equate it with something, that's the value, that the conversion value in that is almost not what you've done, but the brand, the value of the brand. And so you got to build that brand too. It's just, you can't just build something in a weekend and then, or in a week, start advertising and expect people to recognize the brand. Right. So I think those both have to go hand in hand in some of the things you're doing.
Yeah. Chris says the promo swap ad is host read. That's a huge difference than some stranger coming on going, listen to my show. Yeah, that's true as well. And I think the only plus side is making a 30-second promo, couple hours, you know what I mean, to really think about it, write it out, add some music, things like that. So it's fairly low, in terms of,
maybe depends on your talent.
That's true too.
You can ruin your brand in a 30-second promo. we're talking about, we've been talking about playing somebody else's brand, but listen, you and I and have both created brand images at times on Canva or whatever that were a little substandard. Right?
Yeah, oh boy.
And
yeah.
We thought it was great at the time. I mean, I've got some old album art out there, oh, it's good enough. And then you start, you start getting some eyes on it. You're like, oh, was that really what it was supposed to be doing? So, I mean, you can quickly ruin your brand in 30 seconds too, if you put out a substandard or, you think it's great, but is it really, you try to make a funny one and that joke doesn't quite land like you thought it was going to, right? Yeah. And you're like, oh, and then it gets played on somebody else's show as a promo swap. So I think you got to be equally careful there. That may be one, right, where you don't trust yourself. If you're creating it, don't trust yourself. You better put that out there and get some solid feedback from some folks.
Yeah. Sure. Todd the Gator, we have a family of Discord communities where we unofficially promote each other's communication and show, and then he says we also guest on each other's shows. So that's a great thing. And the one and only Hall of Fame podcaster Rob Greenlee in the chat room this morning, he says, thanks all and appreciate the discussion about the new media show, which he did with Todd. Yes, I'm increasingly thinking the show has been doing with Todd. Wait, Dave can't read. I've been doing with Todd needs to end for me. Todd will likely continue. See, the thing I loved about Rob is, number one, I always, whatever Rob is reading is stuff that I'm not. So I'm kind of more of the Todd frame of, mind. And so I always loved Rob's opinion because I'm like, wait, and then I'm like, where did he get this from? He's like, oh, it's in Variety magazine. I'm like, well, I never read Variety. So it was always interesting to get that different perspective, just because it's different. And that makes me go, so, very interesting. But he has, I want to say Rob Greenlee and Friends podcast tips. I know he has a show he does. Used to be Thursdays, because I try to catch it when I could. But all this is, it's not what one promotion strategy should I do. It's look at your schedule, start your timer, get some tracking links and try them all. Maybe not all at the same time, but my favorite is when Gary Arndt, who gets 1 million downloads a month because he does a daily show. And he said, yeah, man, he goes, I had to quit all my social. I just didn't have time. I go, you quit all your social? And he goes, yeah. I go, what did it do to your numbers? And he goes, absolutely nothing. And I was like, whoa. Yeah. So that's when I was like, all right, note to self, but
we're living in an interesting time with social right now. Right. And I think if you like, lots of folks have really negative opinions about other opinions that are on social,
Oh yeah.
good or bad, right? And so it's caused a lot of questions about what I can and what I can't trust that's out there. Well, they're not, lots of folks are not making that blanket statement about you. They're just making it about the platform. And so
Yeah.
if you think you're going to do some things in that way, I think you got headwinds. Again, not saying you might be having amazing success right now with yours, with your strategy there, but I think there's some headwinds in social. We've buried into the groups on those, whether it be a Discord group or a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group, where some of that stuff hasn't necessarily leaked into the groups yet, right? Facebook groups still don't have that much advertising in them. I don't know if they all, like ours is ad free, but maybe some of the newer ones aren't. I don't know. I was telling somebody the other day, as soon as ads start popping in the group stuff, I'm out. We're gonna have to move our group right out of Facebook.
Yeah.
So
I'm hoping I
there's
can.
headwinds.
Yeah, and I'm hoping I'd like to move the Podpage Facebook group off of Facebook, even though just because what I'm seeing now. And I was like, well, this is creative, but I'm sure it's automated, where people will make fake profiles. And it's always interesting because it's Jim Smith, and then you go over and it's odd because Jim doesn't have any. In some cases, he might have posts, but in many cases they don't. And you just go, And so the one guy was like, well, and he had answered the questions, which is always a big red flag because it's like, do you agree to the rules to not spam and blah, blah, blah. So he'd done all that and we let him in and instantly posted something that was inappropriate. And I was like, so now when I go over and look at their profile and see like, is it obvious you're a podcaster? Because if not, why are you in a Podpage group?
Right.
And it's just, there are things that would make it so much easier. I know you can put events into a group. But like, I love Heartbeat. I haven't done it yet, but you could turn it on where if people classified themselves as I'm an educator, I'm a business person, I'm in comedy, you could then have it do kind of what we're talking about here. Like, hey, you have something in common with this person. And then you take it from there. And I've never turned that on. I've always, it's interesting because, some of the stuff that Ralph has talked about, because Ralph's a member of the School of Podcasting, it's in the library, it's in the documents. Like there's a feedback corner, there's a promo swap. That's all in the School of Podcasting, I guess. And that's just like, I'm going to put that on me and go, I just need to promote it more and go, who's got a promo for the thing? It's right here. And so I need to promote the stuff because I assume that when everybody come in, they go through, and that's because that's what I do. I just joined a group, but I went through all of their resources. I do that when I go on the road. The first thing I do is walk around the neighborhood and see what do I have available to me. So if something comes up, I can go, oh, there's a CVS 2 blocks that way, kind of thing. But Ralph says, Dave, you did turn that on in Heartbeat because it asked me for that the other day. Yeah, it's asking you to classify yourself, but I don't have the match you with other people. It's now visible that you're a business person. And like I can see people that are affiliates for the School of Podcasting. So it lets people see, and then you can go to the directory, which has a link to their website. Because I'm always worried. I had one guy, and I still have kind of PTSD about that. I had one guy that was just creepy and was creeping on females at the School of Podcasting. And I eventually had to kick him out. So I'm always, right now, all the members can talk amongst each other because that's what you want to do in a community. And I'm just hoping that they're not, being naughty or icky or things of that nature. But who I don't have to worry about being icky or creepy or ugly is our awesome supporters. And you can become one of these by going over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And there are multiple tiers that you can join there. And we're also brought to you by the schoolofpodcasting.com, where we've got courses, we've got coaching, and a community. And you can join that and save by using the coupon code COACH. And don't forget, you have a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if on day 29, you're like, this podcasting thing takes up more time than I thought, yeah, I'll give you your money back. And right now, if you go over to askthepodcastcoach.com, you'll see we are running on Podpage. If you'd like to try Podpage, that's my affiliate link. Just go to trypodpage.com, and we're live streaming today using Ecamm. You can find that at askthepodcastcoach.com/Ecamm. And Ecamm has 2 M's because it's good. And if you need more Jim Collison, and who doesn't, then go check him out over at theaverageguy.tv and check out his show, Home Gadget Geeks. And it's time for the featured supporter of the week. We go over to the Wheel O' Names. And is it Jody from Audio Branding? Is it Ralph from the Grit and Growth Business? Ross Brand, all these fun-filled people. We're going to find out when I click spin. And it's going to be John Muntz over at Creatively, johnmuntz.com. That's MUNTZ. Check out John. He's got great stuff over there. John, thank you so much for being an awesome supporter. We deeply appreciate that, and we'll have a link to his stuff in the show notes. And if you're sitting there and you're thinking, hey, this show was kind of fun today, and we made you think, or maybe we educated you, or we saved you some time, or saved you some money, then maybe you should go over. You don't have to do it forever. Maybe you just want to do it for a couple months. Maybe you want to gamble, join up at the $20 level and get your name on the Wheel of Names. Just go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome, and you can become an awesome supporter today. So with that, here's something that I wanted to spotlight. If I get that over here. This was in the Podcast Business Journal. So James Cridlin was interviewing this guy about Patreon. And so James asked, advertising sometimes means that you can't necessarily say some of the things you want to. How important is Patreon to you as a business when you're making your shows? Are you able to give us any sort of numbers? To which, in this case, the guy's name was Zach, says, I'm very rich from Patreon. Thank you. I'm not allowed to give official numbers. That's when you know somebody's making money, typically. Is like, I know Darren Dake was a member of the School of Podcasting, and along the way, he would say, oh, I'm doing this. And the last time I asked, he said, I'm making 6 figures, but I can't really say. And so there comes a point when people will no longer tell you how much they make. But he says, I'm doing well, and I went to Spotify, and I want to specify that I'm not giving any of it to charity, but I would if I found a charity that I like. So apparently he's doing okay. And so James said, but are we talking about an extra 10% in terms of ad revenue or more? And he said an extra 50%, to which James said, 50%? Crikey. No, he actually didn't say that. He says, yeah, if you do it right. And so this is a great follow-up question. So the guy said, yeah, if you do it right. And James then said, and so in your mind, what's doing it right? And he said, some people just create a Patreon or whatever, Supercast, etc., or really any model of paywall just to get the money when it should be community building. So if you're giving them more value than they sign up for, I think that's a beautiful thing, and people really enjoy it. So we like to over-deliver. And I was like, I like the way he said that, because I think sometimes we do. We're just like, oh, I'm going to do this and people are going to give me money. I'm like, well, that's where you'll hear the term value for value thrown around a lot. And I'm like, well, we try to give value here. The patrons get an advertising free version. So any of the dynamically inserted ads aren't put into the patron version. So yes, Chris says do
you cut out our ads in the beginning on that version, or do those
no, those are still in there. Yeah. I was going to, in fact, I used to in the early days, and then I thought, well, how do Dan and how does podcast branding feel about that? How does Marc feel about that? And I was like, so I leave those in. I leave the middle thing, but I used to, and in fact, I think I still have one that's running, put in from Buzzsprout, the dynamic ad. And when that one's over, I'm done, because I just went back and listened, and it's not worth the $14 for 1,000 downloads. I'm like, it's just, I got a Patreon. That's how I'm making money on this one. So, yeah. Craig, from the Ingleus podcast, I'm all really miss Todd and Rob together. I've been a fan of the New Media Show for many years. Yeah. Well, here again, we talked about this at the beginning of the show with Marc Maron. Cheers, Seinfeld, MASH.
Yeah.
They all eventually come to an end. I don't know how I'm going to end podcasting. I think eventually it'll be my last, and I hope this is not the case. I don't want to manifest this. But if I physically can't do it, I think that would be the only thing that would stop me from podcasting. As long as I can think and talk and press record, I don't see me stopping. Or if podcasting just gets ruined and I'm disgusted, I'll be like, I told you not to, it's 2031. And I'll be like, I told you not to trust Spotify, now there's YouTube. And it's like, yeah, so who knows? But
we should say, I don't know if you said that, but you were alluding to it. Congratulations to Todd and Rob for making that long in this. I mean, you and I in this space too. We're talking about it. How long can we do this for? As well as, there's a lot of headwinds to it. And then there's relational headwinds to it. But thanks to them for bringing a lot of great information to us over the years. We've quoted them many times. We've talked about the content that they've talked about many times,
right?
And they've been very kind in this space. Certainly when you're talking about other podcasters, you run the risk of the wrath coming back. They do listen. Rob, we started talking about it and Rob showed up, right? So you run those risks. They've been very gracious to us as we've talked about some of the same things they've talked about. Listen, we've given them live feedback on this show at times, right? Either intentionally or unintentionally. And they have been over the years, they used to follow us, right? I mean, they were doing it live, right?
Saturday mornings
Yeah, and that was unintentional, by the way. That was not an intentional thing. Maybe it was intentional that we started doing this early so that you could listen to that show. But appreciate their contribution together. Both of them will still continue to provide great content in their own way, however they do it. And then, like the Eagles, maybe there will be a reunion tour, somewhere in the future where they'll come back and do a reunion tour, but or twice or maybe 3 times. And so I appreciate their commitment together to the industry. And now we'll continue to see, because they're not quitting, right? They're not going away.
No,
we'll continue to see how that develops here in the future.
Yeah. In fact, Rob says, I'm not stopping podcasting, shutting down most shows to launch a new show and focus on that one show. Again, see, that's something, if somebody said, Dave, if you were to do it differently, what would you do? I would have one show. I'd have one show. If I think about all the time I spend making other shows and then, trying to promote those, and then, like, if I had one show and one show that I only had one content for one show and promoted only one show, I think it would be a better strategy than what I'm doing now. But on the other hand, I then wouldn't have knowledge of Buzzsprout and Blueberry and Libsyn and all the other shows I have, primarily just to understand the back end of those so I can recommend appropriately. But the thing I always loved about Rob, I mean, Rob's been in radio before podcasting.
Sure.
Like he did. Rob used to stream his radio show on a reel player. I mean, come on now. That's old school.
He's been around a long time and done a lot of different things. I remember Rob when he worked at Spreaker and doing this. I listened to that.
And the Zune.
But so it's been fun. His world intersects with mine because of some of the Microsoft stuff I used to do and the home server stuff. And of course, that home server led to, if you have a home server, you got to have a lot of media on it. And so we had a Zune back in those days as well. And so, mine and Rob's worlds have collided a bunch over the years, just in both listening and just in the topic stuff of that. Rob, appreciate all the work that you've done to continue to be super varied. Like there's a great example of Rob's kind of been skating to the puck in a lot of these topics necessarily outside of the podcasting world, still while maintaining his his interest in podcasting and some of the stuff that he's doing. So again, congratulations to the two of them for doing such a great job over the years, and we'll see what the future brings.
And Rob's been a great guy in keeping the Podcast Hall of Fame, going, and he's the guy that's kind of prodding people behind the scenes and things of that nature. So always appreciate him for that. Rich Graham says, I don't want to jinx anything, but I don't think Dave has had an Ecamm or Stream Deck issue yet. Hey, show's not over. Yeah.
You just jinxed it.
That's it. Somebody sent in a super chat so we can see if the $sign button is working today. But Ralph says, okay, so if you only had one show, what show would that be? That would be the School of Podcasting. I started off with a show for musicians.
What?
Yeah.
What? Not us, the podcast coach? I know how I rate. I'm out of here.
Well, you think about it, this one came after the School of Podcasting.
No, for sure.
But I've started probably 30 shows, I think the last time I checked after that. And so, but yeah, like I do your podcast consultant, I tested to see if having short shows would make a difference. And the answer is no. And yet I still do it and that's one that I can do that show and they're 9 minutes or less in about 30 minutes. I'll see a question. I'll be like, okay, great. I go over and it's just off the top of my head. I let Captivate do its magic with its SEO AI notes and then off it's going. So that one is one that I go, okay, I can keep that going. But I had there we go. Ralph's coming. So he wants to see me blow it. All right, so I'm going to wait for that to go off the screen. Thank you for the lovely super chat from the Grit and Growth Business. Here are a few bucks for you from Ralph. Thank you so much. And as soon as that goes off the screen, I'll hit the button. And survey says, are we going to get the big boost?
That's the thing, though.
There it is.
Telegraph it. While you're talking, you're hitting the button, and then it just does it. And then if it doesn't do it, nobody knows that you were pushing the button.
I should just leave that on, and just every 5 seconds it just blasts money in everybody's. Not at all. No, just that is kind of annoying that I do have to wait for it to stop raining money so I can hit the stop button. There we go. Thank you, Ralph. It's just one of those things because and this is why we fall into this trap with multiple shows, is the fact that when you have multiple shows, you think it's easy because, I can get it into Apple and Spotify like that. Super easy to start a show. Okay, great. There's still only 24 hours and you still need to promote that thing. It's like when you write a book. I remember when I wrote my book, I was like, whew, it's done. Like, nope, that's the work's just starting. Writing the book is the easy part. Getting people to read it, that's a whole different ball game. And so same thing with a podcast. Now you're like, oh, great, I got show number 2 up. Yep, now you got to go out. Okay, well, I'm just going to post it on social. Well, as we've now said, social is a trickle. It'll work, and here's the promo that you can, I have found the other thing about the promo, just to graze going back there just a bit, you do potentially grow your network by doing that, right? You might find another show that's similar to yours. Then that's always a good thing when you can grow your network. How are we doing on time? 20 minutes. Let's go back to this one. Not so much a how-to. Jim, what would you say what's the best thing about having a podcast and what's the worst thing about having a podcast? Let me make sure. Am I reading that right? I've got like 37 windows. Yeah. What are the best and worst parts of having a podcast? So you want to go first or you want me to?
Yeah, no, I can talk about it. Some of the best. Let's talk about the best parts. So actually Barb was mentioning this. She said, my favorite is Ask the Podcast Coach because I love the chemistry of yours and Jim's voices that together could listen to you for thousands of miles. Barb, appreciate that. That's the best part, right? Is that the feedback's great, but the relationship that I get to have with you on Saturdays, I look forward to the hour and a half that I get with you. We laugh, we joke, we do a 15-minute pre-show and a few minutes afterwards, some personal stuff, how's things going, right? So the relationships, and I think about the relationships, co-hosts like a Mike Uyghur, who I'd had on Home Gadget Geeks for a lot of years. He and I are still very, very good friends. And so it's an opportunity to develop those relationships. This week, I'd Kevin Schoonover on Home Gadget Geeks. Kevin and I have been friends for 15 years because of a podcast, right? I mean, he goes back to the early days of Home Server Show with Dave McCabe. And Dave McCabe is another example of someone who I've stayed friends with over the years who we started podcasting. So for me, the best parts of podcasting, honestly, I mean, I do care that people listen. That's why we do it. But I love the relationships that exist between you and me and the co-hosts and the friends that I've met. That some that have come and gone. I've Mike Howard, who was I think he listened to us out here for a while. He passed away during COVID, so 2020, and not because of COVID, but he, he was a dear friend.
Yeah.
And so I think the reason, if people ask why I do this, even at work, yeah, I mean, I get paid to do this at work. It's great. It's awesome that I do.
Yeah.
But even those relationships that I've built in those settings, on both the Clifton Strengths podcast and on Theme Thursday before that, my co-host, I just had great relationships with them, and they were my friends. And so it was a business venture, and yeah, we try to do some things and all those kinds of things. You and I do that. But I really like the co-hosts. And then I enjoy, like Uncle Marv's out there right now. He's a co-host. He's also a regular co-host on Home Gadget Geeks. And I've gotten to know him through those, the spending those times together. So the content relationships are first for me. Content is second. And then advertising is third. Like I could literally, if they never went anywhere, I'd be okay, because I get the benefit of having these relationships with these folks. Now they do go somewhere, right? And we have 5.2 million downloads over there at Gallup now for the network, and you kind of go, yeah, okay, so we've gotten some downloads. It's done some things. I get regular feedback from listeners, which I appreciate, when they say, hey, I'm here because of your podcast. Thanks for being here. That's the best part, right? Those are the best part. It's tough to say a worse part. I've gotten AI has helped with the show notes creation, which I really used to hate. I used to hate all that production stuff, but we've gotten so many great tools now to be able to do that. So I would say that's my second least favorite thing in it, is the production piece of it. Although, interestingly enough, AI has made the show notes creation and the work that's associated with getting things done so interesting that now there's like, there's some cool things that AI can do that used to take me hours, or if I never even do it if AI wasn't doing it for me. And so that's even gotten, show notes or note creation or editing or transcripts or linking, some of those things has gotten better for me, not worse, because of the advent of where we're at in AI. So those two things, I don't think it's a most and worst. I think it's I love this, and I just love this a little bit less.
That's actually a good way of looking at it. Yeah.
How about you?
Todd the Gator says, can we agree that the worst thing is editing? No. I love editing. It's my favorite thing. I'm kind of with you. The relationships, the fact that I can go, and this sounds like a humble brag, but I can go to, nowhere, in the middle of the country, and I'm always amazed that I will get an email and somebody will say, hey, you're right in my backyard. Can I take you out to my favorite barbecue joint? Yeah. And I'm like, how do you know me again? Like, what? So that's always kind of interesting. And I've met, the beautiful thing is you end up hanging around people that are a lot like you. We all have something in common in the fact that we love to create content for our audience. So you have something in common with these people. But because I'm a teacher, I remember when I was a teacher in the corporate world, I had a woman that was crying before a PowerPoint class because she was deadly afraid of computers, and she was convinced she was going to break it. And by the end, she was having a blast. And then I remember Marcy Rosenbaum, because she called me and said, I can't do this. I hate technology, but I got to start a podcast. And I said, I can get you there. We'll get through it together. And she called me crying when she was in iTunes. She's like, I told you I couldn't do it, and you said, yes, you can, and I'm in iTunes. And I never will forget that phone call. Because to me, as a teacher, when you've transformed somebody, like I didn't have this and now I do. And you said, I told you I couldn't, and you said, yes, you can, and now it's there. That will always just like, that's what I love to do. I don't want to be, I've been growing up the guy on the outside looking in, and anytime I can see somebody on the outside that wants to be on the inside and I can go, here, let me show you, I can get you on the that just puts a ton of gas in my tank. So that's a big one. But it's for me again, I'm a creative guy. So like going back to if I only had one show, I could see me using maybe mood music or there'd just be a little more polish on the School of Podcasting, where now it's like, okay, here it is. It might be more NPR style interviews. I could do all sorts of other stuff, but I do the School of Podcasting in one day. I come home from church, and basically Monday through Saturday, I figured out what I'm doing. And then Sunday I sit down and I record it, I edit it and put it out. And there are times when I'm like, well, this is what you get when you wait till the last day to do it. And I'm like, this is as good as it's going to get. So, but yeah, I think just the community, the friendships that we have, that's why, I mean, literally, if it wasn't for the fact that I actually like you, Jim, this show would have stopped years ago. Yeah. But there are times when I'm like, like I really miss, for the record, I miss Saturday morning. Like I used to go ride my bike and but I'm like, you know what? You can do that Thursday nights now. Cause I was like, can't we move the show to like a Thursday night? And I'm like, or here's a novel idea. You could ride your bike on Thursday night instead of riding your bike Saturday morning. Just do it then, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, it's always fun. And the chat room's always a blast because there are times when I'm looking at Jim going, what do you got? He's got nothing. And I'm like, okay, I'm on the same boat, and the chat room will come through and come through with some great content that we can talk about.
Well, I'm always surprised, we go 90 minutes and the numbers don't change. Like at 60, they're not dropping. This is another one of those things where people say people have got short attention spans these days. I'm like, no, because the numbers stay pretty consistent. Now, we could have people coming in late, early people leaving early and people coming in late, replacing those. But we keep this pretty consistent number live across it. That always kind of surprises me. I'm kind of like, in Home Gadget Geeks is very similar. The minimum is an hour. The maximum is 90 minutes. We kind of land somewhere in between, kind of based. I try to keep it. Most of the hosts now, we try to keep to an hour, but some want to go a little bit longer, or the content is good, so we have a good time on it. And so, we just kind of go till we run out of content. The relationships are by far the best part, I think, in what we're doing here. So thanks for hanging out with me on Saturdays. I used to mow the lawn Saturday mornings. I just mow it Saturday afternoons now. It's a little harder in the summer, but a little better in the winter, although you don't mow much.
Right. According to Stream Deck, we have 30 people watching right now.
Yeah.
That's a very full classroom. The other thing I liked about it is, like, I don't know about you, I am always learning something. Like there's always something changing, whether it's AI, like right now I'm diving into Magi. I am learning more about SEO because I work at Podpage. Like I'm always, and that's just something, when I was teaching in the corporate world, it was, if you stopped learning, you didn't just stop, you were going backwards. And so I think that's the other thing. Like last night, I've been working with this business coach, and this is the last month of our contract, and it dawned on me, I'm like, oh, wait, there's a whole other course I haven't gone through yet. So I was just blowing through it last night, and I was like, all just taking notes and going crazy on it. So I think that's the other thing that, it's not really podcasting specific. I could, read books about other stuff too, but it gives me something to not only learn, but then do. Like, ooh, that sounds really cool. I want to try that. And because it's a podcast and because it's mine and I can do whatever the heck I want, well, I'm going to try this. So I think that's the other thing that's kind of fun. Yeah. Todd the Gator says, but what about that one guest that sounds like they're in a tunnel? Those are people you don't let on your show.
Yeah.
Adobe can only help so much.
I get that at work all the time. It's so hard. The work podcasts, I can't control, on Home Gadget Geeks. I pretty much let only podcasters join me
Right.
on that show. Right? It just doesn't. And even like this last week, Kevin doesn't have his own podcast, but he bought a really good mic a while back, and so I like having him on the show. But at work, I don't get that opportunity. I kind of got to I try to set it up in a way. I mean, these are people who are giving us 2 hours of their time to be on a program where we benefit from it. So I don't get too particular or too snooty on the sound. I try to pre-position them the best I can. It'd be great to have a headset. It'd be great to have a microphone. Some of those kinds of things. And thank goodness we do live in a world now where we do have a lot of great audio tools to clean some of that up. Now you can't put lipstick on a pig in some cases, and it's just bad. We had we had a situation a couple weeks ago where we're at StreamYard. We use StreamYard at work. And StreamYard, a while back started doing this recording. It's recording locally as well, and then uploading it. So you're getting a local recording, which is all fine and dandy, except if you have somebody who has a really low powered Mac or PC. That's not such a great experience, because even their local recording is being affected because it's trying to do two things at once, right? So that's kind of been a new problem. And man, I did everything I could AI wise to fix her video and try to make it better. And in the end, we were like, we're just gonna have to put it out the way it is.
Yeah.
We're not gonna do it again.
We had somebody in Reddit ask that question. A guy I've been wanting to talk to forever is finally coming on. He only has a laptop mic. I've never had this issue before. What is the solution? Well,
send him a headset, buy him a cheap headset and send it to him. That's the solution. Yeah.
There's that, or and that would be mine. It'd be like, wait. If you've been waiting this long, you can wait longer. Or just ensure whatever you're using, Riverside, Squadcast, et cetera, make sure they're on separate tracks, because you're going to have to process their audio to make. And that's where somebody else was talking in Reddit about different volume levels. They have 4 people on their show. And I'm like, separate tracks, auphonic.com. I'm like, run every track through. It'll remove the hiss and level out the audio, and then take those 4 kind of fixed files. And that's where you go in and start editing for the content. That's a perfect example for Auphonic, where it's just because they said people get comfortable and then they sit back and they're not right up on the mic where they should be. They're sitting back here and that whole 9 yards. Marc says you actually can put lipstick on a pig. It is still a pig though, but it's I would think
beautiful. Pigs are beautiful in their own ways.
Yeah. And then Dan,
bacon. You get bacon from pig. That's beautiful.
Dan says most people have phone headsets. That would be the other one. See if I think Riverside has an iPhone app that they could use. Does anybody here live stream with Riverside? Because I saw Heartbeat, which is the tool I use for my community. They were live streaming with with Riverside, and it kept pixelating every now and then. And I was like, because that's when we used it, and that was forever ago. Like they'd been out 2 months when I tried to live stream with Riverside, and it wasn't great. And so if anybody's done live streaming with Riverside, let me know. Ralph says, and they still stink. I'm adding some pasture pigs here on the farm. So there you go. I'll have to get some Revlon for the pigs. Absolutely. The other thing, why my mouse is, it's not my Ecamm this morning. It's my mouse that's not behaving. This question was basically, I'm new to the game. I've released 3 episodes, so very new to the game. They're doing quite well for a new podcast. I'm helped by having an established audience and celebrity guests from the get-go, and I am in no way unaware of the advantage that provides. That said, I've started with a bi-weekly show, and I figured out that gives me time to establish the show a bit, time to promote it, the next one, and basically what they found out, which is just normal, when your show comes out, you get a big old spike, and then after about a week and a half, it's nothing. And that's kind of the way every podcast works, but they're saying, should I consider going weekly, which kind of goes back to the Marc Maron discussion. Well, the next time you do an episode and you're doing research for it, start a timer. When you when you record the interview, I know the interview ends up being 20 minutes, but you're on Zoom or whatever, Riverside or Squadcast for an hour, that counts. And then editing and then promoting and then the writing of the show notes and like time all that stuff. And then just ask yourself, wow, that took 14 hours for my 20-minute podcast. Okay. Do you have 14 hours a week to do a podcast? And if the answer is no, then no, don't go to weekly. I think I wouldn't go any less than bi-weekly. I listen to probably 3 shows that do bi-weekly, but if you can't do it, then don't, because it's what you want to do is you want to squeeze your podcast into your life, not try to squeeze your life into your podcast. Your life is more important. So that comes first, and then put the podcast into it. Because otherwise, you have these people. I've seen multiple people that have said, oh, I'm doing a daily show. And in my brain, I think, no, you're not. And then I'll help them. And then daily becomes 3 times a week, becomes 2 times a week, becomes once a week. And so it's a lot depending on, like Ralph does a daily show, but his is short. And so they're trying to do a 30-minute episode daily. And I'm like, and you have a job and a spouse and 2 kids. I'm like, you're not doing a daily show unless you just don't sleep. And that's not good either. So, yeah. And then then Ralph says, but podcasting is my life. Well, okay.
Then do it.
Then do it. Yeah.
Time doing it. Yeah.
It's and then get some stuffed animals or something to put on your pillow at night, so you have somebody to talk to and things like that.
I've thought about retirement. Use in retirement. Decade from now.
Yeah,
thinking about a morning, a 2-hour morning show, and get some guests and treat it like a radio format for that matter, and then. Make it available as a podcast. But the goal would be, I love live better than I love recorded, just to be honest. I love the audience interaction. I love the spontaneousness of it. I don't care about the edits. If folks want to listen to it later, that's fine. I would rather do a live show. And so I've thought about, doing something where it's quick, do some preparation for it, have it ready to go Monday through Friday. Maybe the 9 to 11 Central Time slot. You can get folks on the East Coast and the West Coast. And just kind of doing something live where people at work can skip work and come out and listen, because we're not going to stream into cars and stuff like that for people's commutes, but something along those lines. I don't know. I go back and forth on that, thinking, oh, do it.
Mark,
no, I don't know. Who knows?
Marc Ronick does a show Monday through Friday. That's where DR it's probably why she's not here. She used to be here every Saturday. She's now kind of a co-host. And I want to say it's Hello Podcasters or Podcast Morning Chat or something. But it's an interesting, to me, a daily show is crazy. Jeff says, Guy, Kawasaki in that case, just interviewed Ben Gilbert from Acquired. And that I just finished editing. They spend weeks preparing for their podcasts. So they sometimes only do 1 a month. So that's a schedule. And then Craig from Inglea's podcast years ago, we had Bob Hope, we had Johnny Cash, and Steve Jobs. Now there's no Hope, no Jobs, and no Cash. I hope Kevin Bacon is feeling okay.
There's a dad joke for you.
There you go. I like that one. Yeah. So Randy Cantrell is in the chat room. I started to watch Leaning Towards Wisdom, version 4.0, now on YouTube. So if you want to watch Randy talking to a microphone, I was like, there you go. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that'll be, I hope
I'm alive too, Randy. I hope I'm alive to see that too. When we get to that
that's it. Yeah. I haven't seen it yet, but I know, Bill Burr has a special out, and it's something like Drop Dead Age, I think is the name of it. And he's talking about that once you get to a certain age, it's okay if you just drop dead because, well, he was 67. You just drop dead sometimes when and I was like, wow, that's a morbid way of looking at it. But has anyone ever died on microphone? That'd be fun.
I'm sure. I am sure.
You know, where you're like going,
Sure.
you know, don't forget to like us on Patreon. And that's weird. My whole left arm is going numb. You know, that's that would be.
It has to. I not say it's common, but it has to. You know, somebody's recording and they're like, "Hold on, I'll be back. Hold, I need to." You know, and then they
they just
rustling of things happening. Somebody call 911. I'm sure that's happened.
I heard it on the internet, so I don't know if it's true, but they said that Red Fox died on stage of a heart attack. And he was doing kind of the whole like, hey, I don't feel right. And they're like, oh, look, he's doing the big one. He's doing that thing because he had a sketch. He was like, oh, Elizabeth, this is the big one. I'm coming to you. And the guy had a heart attack. And everybody's like, oh, wait, he's not moving. So I don't know if that's true or not, but that would be kind of tricky. But meanwhile, we're at 12 o'clock. So Jim, what is coming up on Home Gadget Geeks?
Yeah, Kevin Schoonover joins me. He's a longtime guest host on there. We spend, you know, you've heard the maker communities, right? Or the maker space. There's a new space emerging called the Fix It space. It's where you just don't go out and buy something new, but you actually try to fix what you've already bought, right? Which may become a more and more important concept in, I'm going to call it maybe our post-consumer world that we're having going forward. So Kevin spends a little bit of time talking about it. Interesting in the sense that these are popping up in communities. You may have a Fix-It space in a community near you. That is now posted and available, homegadgetgeeks.com.
And I'm frantically typing behind the scenes here because I want to give my buddy a shout out. If I've read or I've listened to the beginning of it, but Pat Flynn has a new book out this week called Lean Learning, and he's talking about how all we do is learn, and we never put any of that stuff into action. So if you're a Pat Flynn fan, I'll put a link in the show notes for that. And on the School of Podcasting, yet another interview. I keep finding interesting people, and I'm interviewing Bree she's a community consultant and has been working in communities forever. And we talk about how to price it. When should I start a community? How do you handle, poopy people in the community, this whole 9 yards. So if you're thinking of starting a community or if you have one, that will be on that. And she said one thing and I was like, all right, that person's coming on my show. If you want to hear what that is, you got to tune in to the School of Podcasting. We're here every week. If you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, ring the bell, the whole 9 yards. And we'll see you next week with another episode of Ask the Podcast Coach.